Hello and welcome to my channel. After an inexcusable gap, I'm back again with the fifth segment of my video series on Gayatri Spivak's landmark essay Can the Subaltern Speak? As you already know, the essay was written in four parts and we had already discussed the first two parts in the previous segments. In fact, the first segment was an introductory one, and we discussed in detail the conversation between the post structuralist intellectuals Foucault and Deleuze, who were of the opinion that the subalterns are capable of speaking for themselves and that the role of the intellectuals was limited to creating the conditions for the subalterns to speak. In this essay, Spivak uses deconstruction to critique the post-colonial intellectuals and their Eurocentrism. She also accuses them of reinscribing the imperial premises and reinstating the West as the subject, even as they claim to dismantle the presumptions of colonial studies. In the second part of the essay, Spivak discusses the influence of French intellectuals on the American academic scenario, particularly the influence of Foucault, who, according to them, is adept in dealing with real issues, real politics, real history, and real social problems. In contrast, Derrida seems to have no commitment to the exploration of social realities. Derrida is apparently inaccessible and also esoteric. That is what he says can be understood only by a small group of people with special knowledge. And Derrida, on the other hand, accuses the French intellectuals or the post-structuralists of a nostalgia of origins. And Spivak supports Derrida's view that this nostalgia for origins cannot be of any help in the exploration of social realities within the critique of imperialism. And then she proceeds to discuss a few aspects from Derrida's work, particularly those aspects which she feels will be of help to the people of the third world. She admits that Derrida's ideas are rather complex and that his writings do not make for an easy reading and comprehension. Despite all the complexity, Gayatri Spivak firmly believes that Derrida is less dangerous than the post colonial intellectuals from the first world. That is, the intellectuals who pretend like the non representer, who just creates conditions for the subalterns to speak, who allow the subalterns to do all the talking without representing them because they believe that the subalterns are politically aware and do not need to be represented. We had already discussed the two types of representation in one of the previous segments, that is Wörtertang and Darstellung. So the post-colonial intellectuals, they actually do not believe in any kind of representation. They do not believe in speaking on behalf of the subalterns. Gayatri Spivak next refers to a chapter titled Of Grammatology as a Positive Science written by Derrida. In this chapter, Derrida confronts the issue of how the ethnocentric Western subject can be stopped from re-establishing itself while attempting to define the other. That is, the European intellectuals, they have a Eurocentric impulse, and Derrida wants to put forward a factual critique of this Eurocentric impulse of the European intellectuals. So, in this chapter, Derrida discusses the limitations of grammatology as a positive science. Of Grammatology is a work written by the French philosopher Derrida. It is the foundation text for Derrida's deconstructive criticism. Grammatology is actually a scientific study of a writing system or script. It analyzes the relationship between spoken language and written language. Earlier, writing was considered to be a derivative form of speech and therefore inferior to it. In this book, Derrida has attempted to deconstruct the view that writing is inferior to speech. He says that writing is not a mere reproduction of speech. He also emphasizes the importance of writing and says that the ways thoughts are recorded in writing affect the very nature of knowledge. Grammatical knowledge is like an empirical investigation, which is based on observation and also experiences, and it also looks for examples. The example that Derrida provides is the self justification of an imperialist project, that is, how they justify their actions. In 17th century Europe, there were three kinds of prejudices in operating in histories of writing. That is, writings were colored by three types of prejudices. One is the theological prejudice, second is the Chinese prejudice, and the third is the hieroglyphist prejudice. Theological prejudice preserves the essence of Hebrew or Greek, which was believed to have been the natural script used by gods. So, as per this, the center of Logos is the Judeo Christian God. And the other two prejudices also conspired to support this theological prejudice, taking the form of an exaggerated admiration. That is, this is in fact the nexus between writing, the concept of a civilized society, and also the structures of desire, power, and capitalization. Now, you must be wondering why we are discussing the limitations of grammatology. Uh, Now, the relevance of this discussion is in that the subaltern voice is actually absent from historiography, and that it cannot be retrieved. That is, any effort that is made towards retrieving the voices of the subalterns from history is bound to fail. And Spivak wants to make an effort to unearth the misrepresentations and also the misreadings of ancient religious texts that gave the European imperialists various ways to justify their policies. In the last part of the essay, Gayatri Spivak discusses the flaws in the interpretation caused by the three prejudices, caused by the limitations of grammatology. The fact that it is colored by the three prejudice, the theological prejudice, the Chinese prejudice, and also the hieroglyphist prejudice. Derrida's deconstruction of logocentrism attempts to undo the logic of ethnocentrism. That is, Derrida insists that logocentrism is a property of the West. Chinese writing actually has a pictorial nature, and therefore it is a break in the European tradition of writing, in the Western tradition of logocentrism. China represents the East, and therefore the Chinese system of writing represents the or becomes by default the other. Derrida now proceeds to offer a solution to the problem of the European subject that attempts to produce the other in order to consolidate its own position. Spivak further says that Derrida, who is a European philosopher himself, has articulated the tendency of the European subject to constitute the other as marginal to ethnocentrism. So that again is the issue with all logocentric as well as grammatological endeavors, because both logocentrism as well as grammatology, they are both both of them belong to the Western tradition. Earlier, speech was considered a more authentic form of language because spoken words directly express the intentions of the speaker. For Derrida, both speech and writing are expressions or are forms of natural language and systems of representation. Spoken words are not always expressions of thoughts in the mind of the speaker. According to Derrida, the meaning of a word is not actually presented to us fully. It is differed in a long chain of meanings And in the context of in fact in the context of ethnocentrism, Derrida says that there are certain parts in the text, blank parts in the text, and that blankness is the thought that must be given to the other. This blankness is the place of the production of theory. The ethnocentrism of the European science of writing is probably indicative of the crisis of European consciousness. The crisis is the slow transition or the turn from feudalism to capitalism through capitalist imperialism. Gayatri Spivak points out that the blank spaces in history actually represent thinking or knowledge rendered invisible or transparent to hide the recognition of the other. The reasons for the text inscribed blankness or the specific absence may be unknown, but what is more important is the sustained and also the developing work on the mechanics of the construction of the other. So that brings us to the end of the analysis of the third part of Gayatri Spivak's essay. I hope to be back again with the final part of Can the Subaltern Speak very soon. Thank you so much.